Close your eyes for a moment and allow the noise of the modern world to fade. The hum of electricity softens. The glow of screens disappears. You find yourself stepping into a life where nothing is guaranteed, where comfort is rare, and where survival begins the very moment you are born. Tonight you're not entering the life of kings or conquerors. You're not wrapped in silk nor welcomed by celebration. You are born into poverty, a condition as old as humanity itself. Imagine the air around you. It is cold or perhaps stiflingly warm. The room is small. The walls are thin. There's no abundance here, only necessity. Your arrival does not bring relief. It brings worry. Another mouth to feed. Another fragile life to protect. Across centuries and continents, poverty has shaped millions of beginnings. From medieval villages to industrial slums, from rural huts to crowded tenements, being born poor has always meant entering a world already heavy with struggle. In this journey, you will gently explore what it meant to come into existence without safety, without wealth, without certainty. You will feel the rhythms of a life where every object matters, where every meal counts, where hope is quiet but persistent. Take a slow breath, settle into this story, and if this journey speaks to you, consider subscribing to the Life in History channel, activating the bell so you don't miss future nights of history. You may also leave a gentle comment sharing where you are listening from tonight, and like the video to support these quiet stories of the past. Now, little by little, you are ready to be born into a world with very little, and to learn how people endured. You enter the world not with celebration, but with urgency. The place where you are born is modest, crowded with the necessities of living and the traces of living that never fully disappear. The air carries the smell of smoke that has seeped into wood and cloth over many seasons, the faint sourness of old sweat, the damp breath of earth when rain has visited and the floor has held on to it. Nothing here is arranged for beauty. Everything is arranged for use. Hands move around you, practiced and careful, but not gentle in the way comfort is gentle. They are gentle in the way survival is gentle, firm enough to keep you safe, quick enough to prevent danger, tender in the brief moments that can be spared. You're wiped with cloth that has been washed so many times it has thinned, the fibres softened by years of scrubbing, the edges repaired with uneven stitches. The cloth is not clean in the modern sense, but it is clean enough, and that is already a kind of effort, already a kind of love. Your first breath is sharp. It scratches your throat. It fills your lungs with a coldness or a heaviness, depending on the season, and your body responds with a cry that rises and falls like a small alarm bell. In that sound there is no meaning yet, only need. You do not know hunger, not yet, but you already know the shock of air, the shock of light, the shock of being separate. The adults around you do not speak loudly. Their voices, when they come, are low and measured, shaped by caution. In a household that owns little, the arrival of a child is both a wonder and a worry. A child is life continuing, a family line stretching forward, a set of hands that might one day work, a face that might one day smile across a table. But a child is also a risk, because in this world risk is everywhere, and resources are thin as worn cloth. You're wrapped quickly, because warmth is precious and your small body loses it easily. The fabric smells of home, smoke, soap that is too harsh and used too rarely, the faint sweetness of stored grain if any is stored at all. The bundle is held close to a chest that rises and falls with a tired steadiness. You feel the pulse of another human being, the heat of skin under layers, and you are soothed by it without understanding why. Outside, life continues. There may be animals shifting in their stalls, hooves scraping wood or packed earth. There may be wind pressing against the walls, searching for gaps, sliding through cracks with thin, whistling fingers. There may be distant human sounds, footsteps, a cartwheel, a voice calling across a yard, because poverty rarely allows isolation. People live close together. They share space, they share noise, they share the weight of each day. If you're born in a village, you might sense the closeness of the land itself, the smell of fields, manure, wet leaves, the smoke of many small fires. If you are born in a town, you might sense the closeness of many bodies, the sourness of waste, the dampness of stone, the crowded breath of narrow streets. Either way, you're born into a world where the margin between enough and not enough is narrow, and everyone knows it. The person who brings you into the world, perhaps a midwife, perhaps an experienced neighbour, perhaps a relative, works with knowledge that is practical, passed from mouth to ear, from hand to hand. There is no guarantee, only experience. Birth can be ordinary, and it can turn frightening in a moment. That truth sits quietly in the room. You cannot name it, but you feel it in the adult stillness, in the careful attention, in the way someone listens to your breathing as if each inhale matters. When you finally settle, when the crying becomes softer, when your body begins to accept the rhythm of being alive, the room does not suddenly become safe. It becomes merely possible. That is the first lesson of being born poor. Life is not promised, but it is attempted again and again through effort, through endurance, through the stubborn choice to keep going. The hours after your birth do not unfold like a gentle lullaby. They unfold like a household adjusting its balance, shifting weight from one foot to the other, trying not to fall. Someone checks the fire. Someone checks the water. Someone counts what remains of bread or porridge or whatever small store can be stretched. The adults' faces are tired, not because they do not care, but because caring must live beside labour, and labour does not pause for joy. If your mother rests, it is a rest filled with listening. She listens for your breath, for your fussing, for any change that might mean danger. Her body aches, and yet she may already be thinking of what must be done next. Washing, mending, preparing food, returning to work when work is the only way the household survives. In poverty, recovery is not a wide road. It is a narrow path walked carefully, because falling behind can be costly. You are fed if feeding is possible. If milk comes easily, you drink and sleep, your mouth learning the shape of nourishment. If milk is scarce, if the mother is weakened by hunger or illness, the household must make choices that feel cruel but are made in the name of survival. Perhaps another woman helps, if the community allows it. Perhaps thin gruel is offered too early, risky but necessary. In this world, the body's needs are not theoretical. They are immediate and demanding. A baby who cannot be fed is a baby who may not stay. Even your warmth is negotiated. On cold nights, you're kept close, tucked beside other bodies, because a room without enough fuel for the fire must use human heat instead. You learn, before memory forms, the comfort of shared breath and shared blankets. The cloth around you is never perfect. It is patched, darned, folded in careful layers. The stitches may be uneven, but they hold, because someone has taken time, precious time, to make them hold. Names and rituals arrive softly. In many places, a child is not fully welcomed until survival seems more likely. This is not lack of love. It is caution learned from grief. Too many small graves have taught families to protect their hearts. If a blessing is given, if a prayer is whispered, it is done with humility, as if asking the world to be kind for once. If a baptism is sought, it may be hurried, because faith can feel like a shield when medicine is weak and danger is common. You do not see these beliefs as ideas, you feel them as gestures, a hand touching your forehead, a murmured word, a sign made in the air. In a world that offers little control, ritual offers a sense of order, a way to place fear somewhere outside the body. And fear is there, always nearby, even when no one speaks it aloud. Around you objects are few, and each one tells a story of use. A wooden bowl worn smooth by countless meals, a pot darkened by soot, used until it becomes thin, a knife sharpened again and again, a blanket repaired with scraps of other blankets. Nothing is replaced casually. Everything is kept alive as long as possible, because the household cannot afford waste. And because you are born into this, you will grow up understanding it as normal, the patience of mending, the quiet pride of making do, the constant awareness that tomorrow depends on what you preserve today. As daylight fades and returns, you begin to settle into a rhythm. You sleep in the short stretches, waking to need, to hunger, to discomfort, to the simple fact that being alive requires attention. Each time you're lifted, you feel the strength in the arms that hold you, strength that has been built by carrying loads, by pulling, by digging, by washing, by enduring weather and worry. These arms are not soft, but they are reliable. They are the kind of arms that keep a family standing, and slowly, without anyone announcing it, your household begins to accept that you are still here. Your breathing becomes familiar music in the room. Your small movements become part of the daily noise. Your presence becomes another thread in the fabric of the home. One more fragile thread. Yes, but real. And growing stronger with each day you remain. In a world that has almost nothing, survival is not dramatic. It is quiet. It is repetitive. It is made of small actions done again and again. Warming you, feeding you, watching you, listening for your breath in the dark. And as the first nights pass, you do not yet know what you have begun, but you are already learning the shape of your life. A life where love exists, yet must share space with scarcity, where hope is present, yet never taken for granted, where endurance is the first gift you receive. As the months pass, you begin to grow into the world that surrounds you. You do not remember your first days, but your body remembers their lessons. It remembers scarcity as a constant presence, something as natural as daylight and darkness. You grow in a place where nothing arrives easily, where every object has already lived a long life before it reaches you, and where your childhood unfolds not around abundance, but around careful limitation. You learn the shape of the room before you learn the shape of the world. The ceiling is low, the walls are close. You notice cracks, stains, and the way light enters only at certain hours, through small windows or narrow openings. Dust floats in the air when the door opens and settles slowly when it closes again. This space is where you crawl, where you sit, where you eventually stand, always under watchful eyes that cannot afford distraction. You are rarely alone. Poverty does not allow solitude. Bodies share space because space is limited, and warmth is shared because warmth is valuable. You grow accustomed to the presence of others, siblings, cousins, elders, neighbours who drift in and out because homes are porous in this world. You hear voices constantly, low and tired, sometimes sharp with stress, sometimes softened by familiarity. Silence, when it comes, feels heavy rather than peaceful. Your earliest memories are not of toys, but of tools and household objects. A wooden spoon worn smooth by years of stirring, a bucket that smells faintly of iron and water, a basket mended with twine. You reach for these things not because they are meant for play, but because they are always there, because they belong to the rhythm of daily life. When you play with what exists. A scrap of fabric becomes a comfort. A stick becomes whatever your imagination needs it to be, though imagination itself is shaped by limits. Clothing arrives rarely and never new. You're wrapped in garments that once belonged to someone else, cut down, let out, patched and repatched. You feel seams against your skin, thick where repairs overlap. You learn quickly how clothes are meant to be treated, carefully, respectfully, never wasted. When fabric tears, it is not thrown away. It is saved, folded, transformed into something smaller, something useful. Even as a child, you sense that these materials matter, that they represent effort, time, and sacrifice. Food continues to define your days. Meals are simple, predictable, and sometimes insufficient. You learn to eat what is given without complaint, not because you are taught discipline, but because there is nothing else. Hunger is not a dramatic event. It is a quiet background sensation, a mild ache that comes and goes, teaching you patience long before you understand the word. You watch adults eat less than they need, and you do not question it. It is simply how things are done. As you begin to walk, your world expands slightly but not freely. You're kept close, watched carefully, because danger is everywhere and protection is limited. A fall can mean injury. An injury can mean infection. An infection can mean death. This knowledge is not spoken to you, but it shapes how you are guided, how hands steady you, how voices warn you away from certain places. Care here is vigilant, because the cost of carelessness is high. You start to understand, in the wordless way children understand, that life is fragile. You may see another child disappear from your world, taken by sickness or accident. There may be a brief period of quiet, a tightening of faces, a return to work sooner than seems right. Loss is absorbed quickly because it must be. There is no space for prolonged mourning when survival demands attention. And so your childhood forms itself around endurance. You do not expect comfort. You expect continuity. You expect the day to resemble the day before. In this repetition, you grow stronger without realizing it, adapting your small body and growing mind to a world that does not bend easily, but does not entirely break either. As years pass, you begin to understand your place more clearly. You are no longer simply protected, you are observed for usefulness. Adults watch how you move, how you listen, how quickly you learn. Childhood here is short, not because it is rushed, but because necessity presses constantly at its edges. You're expected to help as soon as helping is possible, even if that help is small. You carry things before you carry responsibility. Water in small containers, firewood in bundles that feel heavy against your arms. You sweep, you fetch, you hold doors, you watch younger children. These tasks are not framed as lessons, they are simply required. Praise is rare, not out of cruelty, but because survival does not pause to applaud itself. You learn satisfaction not from recognition, but from completion, from knowing that something has been done and that the household moves forward because of it. Your body changes under this rhythm. You become lean, your muscles shaped by repetition rather than training. You develop balance, strength, and endurance without naming them. Rest exists, but it is never indulgent. When you sit, you listen. When you lie down, you sleep deeply, because tiredness is honest and complete. Sleep comes quickly in a life filled with physical effort and constant alertness. You become aware, slowly, of differences between people. You notice clothing that is less worn, food that is more plentiful, voices that speak with more confidence. You sense that there are worlds beyond yours, worlds where scarcity is not constant, where childhood might stretch longer, softer. This awareness brings no immediate rebellion. It brings a quiet understanding of distance, an invisible line that separates lives without ever being drawn on the ground. Sometimes this awareness carries shame, not the sharp shame of accusation, but the dull discomfort of comparison. You learn to keep certain things hidden: hunger, worn shoes, patched sleeves. You learn when to speak and when silence is safer. These lessons sink deep, shaping how you move through shared spaces, how you present yourself, how you lower your expectations before the world has the chance to lower them for you. Yet within this narrowing, something else grows: resourcefulness. You learn to fix rather than replace, to adapt rather than demand. You observe adults solving problems with limited means, inventing solutions from scraps and patience. You absorb this creativity as naturally as language. It becomes part of you, a quiet confidence that you can manage with little, that you can endure conditions that might overwhelm others. Joy does not disappear from your childhood. It simply arrives differently. It comes in moments rather than objects. A warm day after many cold ones. Laughter shared over something small and unexpected. A story told by firelight. These moments shine briefly, brightly, and then fade, leaving behind a gentle afterglow. You learn to treasure them, not because they are rare, but because they are fleeting. As you grow older, childhood loosens its grip. There is no ceremony marking its end. It fades gradually, replaced by expectation, by responsibility, by the understanding that you are becoming part of the structure that keeps the household alive. You do not mourn this transition openly. It feels inevitable, like the changing of seasons. You accept it because resistance would change nothing. By the time you leave this stage behind, you carry poverty inside you as much as around you. It has shaped how you think, how you measure risk, how you value stability. It has taught you caution and resilience, humility and strength. You may not name these lessons yet, but they are already there, settled deep, ready to guide you through the next phase of a life that will continue to demand much and give little easily. As you grow further into this life, the place you call home becomes more than a backdrop. It becomes a presence that shapes your body, your habits, and your sense of what is normal. This home is not designed to soothe or protect completely. It exists to shelter, and even that function is fulfilled imperfectly. Yet it is all you know, and so you adapt to it fully. The structure itself bears the marks of compromise. Walls are thick in places, thin in others. Gaps allow air to slip through, carrying cold in winter and heat in summer. You learn where to sit depending on the season, where drafts linger, where warmth gathers. The floor is hard, sometimes uneven, shaped by countless footsteps. You feel it through thin soles, through bare feet, through the simple act of standing still for too long. Space is limited, and every part of it is used. Sleeping, eating, working, resting, all happen within the same few rooms, sometimes within the same single room. Furniture is sparse and practical. Nothing is placed for a comfort alone. A table is there to work on, a bench to sit briefly, a bed to sleep, often shared. Privacy does not exist as a concept. Life is lived collectively, because there is no other way. You become used to bodies around you at all times. At night you sleep close to others, listening to breathing, coughing, shifting weight. Heat is shared because fuel is scarce. In winter, the cold presses relentlessly against the walls, and the only reliable warmth comes from proximity. You learn to fall asleep with another person's elbow against your ribs, another's shoulder near your face. This closeness feels normal. Solitude would feel strange, even unsafe. During the day, the house is rarely quiet. Sounds echo easily in small spaces. Voices overlap, tools clatter, containers are moved, filled, emptied. You learn to distinguish sounds without looking. You know when someone is irritated by the sharpness of movement. You know when someone is tired by the heaviness of footsteps. These auditory cues become part of your awareness, guiding your behavior without conscious thought. The home smells constantly of use. Smoke from the hearth clings to wood and fabric. Dampness lingers after rain. Food odours come and go, sometimes comforting, sometimes teasing. Waste is never far away, even when managed carefully. You grow accustomed to these smells. They stop registering as unpleasant. They simply signal life being lived under pressure. Maintenance is constant and never complete. Something is always breaking, wearing out, loosening. Roofs leak, walls crack, tools dull. Repairs are made with whatever is available. Twine replaces rope. Cloth patches holes. Wood splints support weak points. You grow up watching adults improvise solutions, understanding that perfection is not the goal. Function is enough. Cold teaches you many lessons. In winter, it enters the house without invitation. It settles into corners, creeps under doors, wraps around limbs. You learn to layer clothing, even when layers are thin. You learn to keep moving to stay warm. You learn that stillness is dangerous when the temperature drops too low. Nights are long, and sleep is shallow when cold seeps through blankets that are never quite sufficient. Heat, when it comes, brings its own challenges. In summer, air grows heavy inside cramped spaces. Smells intensify. Tempers shorten. Sleep becomes restless. You learn to seek shade, to drink sparingly, to endure discomfort without complaint. Weather is not an inconvenience here. It is a force that shapes daily survival. The home also defines your relationship with the outside world. Leaving it means exposure to other dangers, but staying inside offers limited protection. You learn when to go out and when to stay close. You learn which paths are safe, which neighbours are reliable, which areas should be avoided. These lessons are absorbed gradually, through observation rather than instruction. Despite its limitations, this home becomes deeply familiar. You know every creak, every weakness, every small comfort it can offer. You know where the light falls best, where to place your body to avoid drafts, where to store objects so they are not lost. This familiarity brings a form of security, even when the structure itself is fragile. As you grow, you stop imagining different kinds of homes. This one defines your expectations. Shelter, you learn, does not mean comfort. It means survival. It means staying dry most of the time. It means walls that stand, however imperfectly. It means a place to return to at night. And in a life shaped by poverty, that is already considered enough. As the years continue, you come to understand that your home is not simply a place where you live. It is an extension of the conditions that shape your existence. It teaches you patience, tolerance, and constant adaptation. It does not change easily, and neither do the people within it. Instead, everyone adjusts themselves to its limits, bending daily habits to fit the space that cannot expand. You learn where you are allowed to be and when. Certain corners belong to certain tasks. A space near the hearth is claimed during cold hours. A section of floor is kept clear for work. Sleeping arrangements shift with seasons, illness, and age. Nothing is fixed permanently. Everything is negotiable, because necessity forces flexibility. You become skilled at moving quietly, at occupying little space, at making yourself smaller when required. Crowding shapes your awareness of others. You sense moods quickly, because ignoring them would be risky. Tension has nowhere to escape in a confined space. When frustration rises, it thickens the air. You learn to notice early signs, a voice growing sharper, movements becoming abrupt, silence stretching too long. These cues guide your behavior. You learn when to speak, when to withdraw, when to make yourself useful to ease strain. Arguments happen, but they rarely explode. There is no room for dramatic conflict. Disagreements must settle quickly because people cannot afford lasting division. The household depends on cooperation. Even resentment is managed carefully, folded inward, postponed until there is time or space to release it. You absorb this emotional discipline as part of daily life. The physical closeness also means you witness everything. There are no closed doors to shield you from fatigue, illness, or aging. You see bodies weaken. You see injuries tended with limited means. You see exhaustion settle into faces over years of repetition. These images shape your understanding of adulthood long before you reach it. You do not imagine a future of ease, you imagine continuation. Noise is constant, but it is not chaotic. It has patterns. You recognize the sounds of morning preparation, midday labor, evening settling. You know when the house is about to rest by the way movements slow and voices lower. At night, even small sounds feel amplified. A cough echoes. A shift in bedding draws attention. Sleep is collective, lightly guarded, because danger can arrive quietly. Cleanliness is pursued within strict limits. Water must be carried, heated, conserved. Washing happens when it can, not when it should. You learn that dirt is not a moral failure. It is a condition of work. Clothing smells of smoke and sweat because those smells mean activity, survival, effort. You grow accustomed to this. It does not offend you. It reassures you that life is continuing. The structure itself ages alongside you. Repairs become more frequent. A beam sags slightly. A roof patch is replaced again and again. You notice these changes not with alarm, but with familiarity. Decay is expected. Maintenance is endless. You understand that no shelter lasts forever, and that preserving it is an ongoing act rather than a one-time achievement. Weather remains a constant adversary. Storms are felt immediately through sound and movement. Rain drums on weak points. Wind forces itself through cracks. You learn to read the house's responses to weather, to anticipate where water might enter, where cold will strike hardest. This knowledge becomes practical wisdom, passed silently from one generation to the next. Despite everything, the home offers a sense of belonging, not because it is comfortable, but because it is known. You know where everything is, even in darkness. You know how to move without disturbing others. You know which imperfections are dangerous and which are harmless. This familiarity creates a fragile sense of control in a world where much is uncontrollable. Leaving the house, even briefly, reinforces its role. Outside lies uncertainty, judgment, exposure. Inside lies hardship, but also routine, memory, and shared endurance. You learn that shelter does not need to be pleasant to be valuable. It only needs to hold long enough for another day to begin. As you grow older, you carry the lessons of this home with you. You learn to tolerate discomfort without panic. You learn to share space without resentment. You learn that stability is something maintained through effort, not something granted. These lessons settle deep, shaping how you will approach every place you live afterward. This home, imperfect and strained, has done its work. It has not protected you from everything, but has taught you how to live within limits, and in a life marked by poverty, that knowledge is as essential as any physical shelter. Hunger does not arrive suddenly in your life. It is not an event. It is a presence that settles in quietly, so early that you almost mistake it for part of yourself. You do not remember a time without it. Instead, hunger grows alongside you, changing shape as you grow, becoming more familiar, more predictable, and in some ways more manageable, even as it never truly disappears. Your days begin with an awareness of food, even before you have the language to name it. You learn the sounds that signal preparation, the scrape of a bowl, the dull knock of bread being cut, the quiet bubbling of something warm over the fire. These sounds carry meaning. They promise relief, however brief. They structure time more clearly than any clock ever could. Meals are simple, repetitive, and rarely sufficient. You eat what is available, not what you desire. Bread, porridge, thin soup, small portions stretch to cover many mouths. Variety is rare. Flavour is secondary. What matters is volume, warmth, and the ability to quiet the ache in your stomach long enough to continue the day. You learn quickly that eating is not about satisfaction. It is about endurance. Hunger teaches you patience in a way no lesson ever could. You wait. You learn to wait without asking, because asking does not change reality. You feel the slow burn behind your ribs, the lightheadedness that comes when effort exceeds intake. The way smells become sharper when your body is searching for fuel. You notice how hunger makes time stretch, how minutes lengthen when you're waiting for food. You watch how food is distributed. Portions are measured carefully, not with scales, but with eyes trained by necessity. Adults divide meals with practiced fairness, even when fairness means everyone receives too little. You notice how some people eat last, quietly reducing their share. You may not understand sacrifice as a concept yet, but you witness it daily. It becomes part of your understanding of care. As a child, you learn which hunger can be ignored and which cannot. There are days when your stomach growls, but you know food will come later. There are other days when the cupboards are bare, when meals are delayed indefinitely, when hunger feels heavier, more insistent. On those days the household grows quieter, movements slow, voices become cautious. Everyone is calculating, conserving energy, waiting for opportunity. You adapt your behavior without being told. You move less when food is scarce. You speak less. You learn that energy must be preserved. This adaptation happens naturally, instinctively, as your body aligns itself with the realities around it. Hunger shapes not only what you eat, but how you exist in space. You begin to associate food with emotion, relief when something warm is placed in front of you, gratitude even when the meal is small, disappointment when portions are thin. You learn not to express disappointment openly, because doing so creates tension without solution. Instead, you swallow it along with your food, letting it settle quietly inside you. Celebrations, when they happen, are marked by food more than anything else. A slightly larger portion, a rare ingredient, a shared dish that feels almost luxurious. These moments stand out sharply against the usual rhythm of scarcity. You remember them long after, not because they were extravagant, but because they were different. Food becomes memory. Food becomes meaning. Hunger also teaches you awareness of seasons. You know when food is more plentiful and when it is scarce. You feel the difference in your body before you see it on the table. Your appetite changes with the year, growing sharper in lean months, easing slightly when harvest or work brings temporary relief. You learn to expect fluctuation, to prepare mentally for periods of lack. As you grow older, hunger becomes more complex. It is no longer just physical, it becomes emotional, psychological. You begin to worry about future meals, about tomorrow, about whether today's food will affect what is available later. This worry settles into your thoughts quietly, shaping your decisions, your expectations, your sense of security. Yet hunger does not only take, it also teaches. It teaches appreciation. It teaches restraint. It teaches you to recognize abundance when it appears, however briefly. You learn to savor slowly, to stretch moments of fullness, to store warmth in your memory against colder days ahead. By the end of this stage, hunger is no longer something you fight. It is something you live alongside. A companion that walks with you through childhood, shaping your habits, sharpening your awareness, and quietly preparing you for a life where nothing is guaranteed, and where every small comfort must be noticed, valued, and held on to while it lasts. As time goes on, hunger stops being something that merely happens to you. It becomes something you anticipate, something you plan around, something that quietly organizes your thoughts and movements. You begin to recognize its cycles, its moods, its warning signs. Hunger is no longer only the ache in your stomach. It is a way of reading the world. You learn that hunger behaves differently depending on the day. There is the light hunger that hums softly, a reminder rather than a threat. It makes you attentive but does not weaken you. Then there is the deeper hunger, the one that drains warmth from your limbs and slows your thinking. On those days, even standing feels heavier. You notice how your body conserves itself, how every movement becomes measured, economical, deliberate. Meals, when they arrive, are eaten slowly, almost reverently. You learn not to rush. Rushing wastes the experience. Each mouthful matters. Texture matters. Warmth matters. You feel food move through your body, feel energy return gradually, as if your strength is being switched back on piece by piece. Fullness, when it comes, is never excessive. It is brief and gentle, like a visitor who cannot stay long. You also learn the social rules of hunger. You learn not to ask for more even when you want to. You learn to accept what is given without visible disappointment. You learn that complaining about food is not just impolite but dangerous, because it disrupts the fragile balance of the household. Hunger teaches restraint not as virtue, but as survival strategy. You observe how adults talk about food when they think children are not listening. Their conversations are filled with calculation, how long supplies will last, whether something can be stretched, whether help might come from outside. These discussions carry quiet tension, never dramatic, but always present. You absorb this tension, and it becomes part of your understanding of responsibility. Hunger also shapes your relationships with others. You notice how irritability rises when food is scarce, how patience shortens, how small conflicts emerge more easily. Hunger affects mood, but no one names it as such. It is simply understood. On days when meals are thin, everyone moves carefully around one another, aware that emotional reserves are as limited as physical ones. You learn tricks to quiet hunger, drinking water to fill space, sleeping to escape the sensation, keeping busy to distract the mind. These strategies are not taught formally. They are discovered, shared quietly, practiced instinctively. Hunger becomes something to manage rather than something to defeat. You begin to understand that hunger is unequal. Some bodies suffer more than others: children, elders, the sick. You see how food is sometimes redirected toward those deemed most vulnerable. This redistribution is not always fair, but it is purposeful. It teaches you that survival is collective and that individual comfort may be sacrificed for the group's endurance. As you grow, hunger sharpens your memory. You remember meals clearly. You remember tastes, however simple. You remember days when food was plentiful, even if only by comparison. These memories stay with you, forming a quiet archive of relief and deprivation. Long after childhood, certain smells and textures will carry you back to these moments, instantly, without warning. Hunger also influences your dreams, not grand dreams, but practical ones. You imagine steady meals. You imagine not having to count portions. You imagine fullness without fear. These imaginings are modest, restrained, shaped by experience rather than fantasy. You do not dream of excess. You dream of enough. When scarcity deepens, hunger becomes a source of anxiety. You begin to worry not only about today's meals, but about tomorrow's. You listen more closely to adult conversations. You watch storage spaces. You notice how often the same foods repeat. This awareness creates a low, constant tension, a feeling that settles in your chest and rarely leaves completely. Yet hunger also teaches resilience. You discover that you can function without ideal conditions, that your body can endure more than you thought, that life continues even when comfort is absent. This knowledge is not pleasant, but it is powerful. It gives you a quiet confidence that will follow you into adulthood. By the time this phase of your life draws to a close, hunger has left its mark on you. It has shaped your habits, your patience, your understanding of value. You no longer take food lightly. You no longer assume availability. You have learned deeply and permanently that nourishment is not guaranteed, and that every meal is the result of effort, sacrifice, and chance. Hunger has walked beside you through childhood, not as an enemy you defeated, but as a companion you learned to live with, and in doing so, it has prepared you for a world that will continue to demand endurance, foresight, and gratitude for even the smallest relief. Work enters your life quietly, without announcement, without ceremony. It does not arrive as a single moment when childhood ends and responsibility begins. Instead, it slips into your days slowly, almost invisibly, until one day you realize that much of your time now belongs to tasks rather than play. In a life shaped by poverty, work is not a phase. It is the foundation upon which everything else rests. You begin by observing. You watch how adults move, how they conserve energy, how they repeat the same gestures day after day without complaint. You notice how nothing is done carelessly. Every action has a reason. Every movement is measured. This seriousness is not joyless, but it leaves little room for distraction. You absorb it naturally, learning that effort is expected, not praised. Soon, observation turns into participation. You are given small responsibilities, chosen carefully so they match your size and strength, carrying items that feel heavier than they should, holding things steady, fetching, sorting, cleaning. These tasks are not framed as lessons or preparation. They are simply necessary. The household depends on them being done, and now you are part of that system. You learn quickly that work does not wait for readiness. It begins when it must. Your body adapts to this reality, developing strength through repetition rather than training. Muscles form slowly, unevenly, shaped by daily use. Your hands grow tougher. Your posture changes. You learn how to lift without wasting energy, how to pace yourself so exhaustion does not arrive too early. Rest exists, but it is conditional. You rest when work allows it, not when you desire it. Moments of stillness are brief and practical. Sitting is acceptable if it serves a purpose. Standing idle is not. You learn to occupy your hands, to find usefulness even in small moments. This constant engagement becomes normal, so much so that inactivity later feels uncomfortable, even unsettling. As work becomes routine, your understanding of time changes. Days are no longer divided by meals and sleep alone, but by tasks completed and tasks remaining. Morning begins when labour begins. Evening arrives when bodies are too tired to continue. You learn to measure progress not by hours but by results. What has been done, what still needs doing. This way of thinking settles deep into you. You also learn the consequences of work done poorly. Mistakes cost time, effort, resources. Broken tool is not easily replaced. A wasted material cannot be recovered. These consequences are rarely explained with words. They are felt directly, through added labour, through tension, through the quiet frustration of those who must compensate. You become careful, attentive, precise. Work teaches you hierarchy. You understand who decides, who instructs, who follows. Authority is not abstract. It is practical, tied to experience and necessity. You learn when to speak and when to listen, when initiative is welcomed and when it creates problems. These social rules are absorbed through observation, shaping how you interact with others long before you consciously reflect on them. You notice that work is relentless, but uneven. Some days demand everything. Others allow brief pauses. Weather, health, opportunity all play roles. You learn flexibility, the ability to shift plans quickly, to respond to changing conditions without complaint. Complaining does not change the weather. It does not create food. It does not lighten loads. You learn this early. Dreaming has little space here, not because imagination is forbidden, but because it is impractical. You may imagine easier days, lighter work, fuller meals, but these thoughts are fleeting. Reality presses close, leaving little room for sustained fantasy. You learn to focus on what is immediate, on what must be done next. This focus becomes a form of protection against disappointment. Despite its demands, work also gives structure. It gives predictability. It gives a sense of belonging. You are needed. Your efforts matter, even if they are rarely acknowledged. You begin to take quiet pride in your ability to contribute, to endure, to keep pace. This pride is not celebrated openly. It is internal, steady, and resilient. By the end of this stage, work is no longer something you do. It is part of who you are. It has shaped your body, your habits, your expectations. You have learned to value effort over comfort, usefulness over ease. Childhood has not vanished entirely, but it has been reshaped, narrowed, redirected towards survival. You are learning, without being told, that in a life born of poverty, dreaming must wait. First, there is work, and work, once begun, rarely loosens its grip. As your responsibilities grow, work stops feeling like something added to your life and becomes the rhythm around which everything else turns. You no longer ask when the day will begin or end. You feel it in your body. You wake with a sense of what must be done, and you sleep when there is nothing left you are capable of doing. Fatigue becomes familiar, not frightening. It is simply the signal that another day has been spent as it should be. You learn that work is rarely clean or contained. It spills into every corner of life. Your clothes carry its marks. Your skin remembers it in small cuts, in soreness that fades slowly, in joints that ache after long hours. These sensations are not treated as injuries unless they threaten your ability to continue. Pain is assessed quickly and practically. Can you still work? Can you still carry? Can you still stand? If the answer is yes, the day goes on. You become skilled at reading tasks before they're given to you. You anticipate needs, noticing what is missing, what is running low, what will soon require attention. This awareness makes you valuable. It also makes you restless. You find it difficult to sit still when something remains undone. Even moments of rest carry an undercurrent of alertness, as if you are always listening for the next demand. Work teaches you endurance more than strength. You learn how to pace yourself, how to divide effort so you do not collapse before the day is over. You discover that speed is less important than consistency. A steady rhythm keeps you going longer than bursts of energy followed by exhaustion. This lesson settles into your muscles, into your breathing, into the way you approach any long task. You notice that work is not shared equally, even among those who will work hard. Age, gender, health, and status shape expectations. Some tasks are heavier, some are more dangerous, some are invisible, but endless. You observe these divisions without questioning them openly. They are part of the order of things. You learn where you fit and what is expected of you within that structure. Praise remains rare. When it comes, it is understated. A nod, a brief word. More often, approval is shown through trust. You are given responsibility without supervision. You're relied upon without reminders. This quiet confidence feels more meaningful than overt praise. It tells you that your effort has been noticed, even if it is not celebrated. Mistakes still happen, and when they do, their consequences are immediate. Extra work, lost time, increased tension. You learn to accept correction without resentment, because resentment wastes energy. You focus instead on doing better next time. This attitude does not come from obedience alone. It comes from understanding that survival depends on competence. As work fills your days, dreaming becomes something that happens only in rare, unguarded moments. Perhaps while walking alone briefly. Perhaps while staring into a fire after others have fallen asleep. These dreams are modest. They do not involve escape or transformation. They involve stability, enough food, predictable days, bodies that do not ache constantly. Your imagination is shaped by reality, not rebellion. You also learn that work creates identity. People are known by what they do, by how well they do it, by how reliably they show up. Reputation matters. It affects trust. It affects opportunity. You become careful about how you are perceived, because being seen as capable can mean the difference between inclusion and exclusion. This awareness sharpens your sense of responsibility further. There are moments when work feels endless, when the repetition becomes heavy, when fatigue presses down harder than usual. On those days, you learn to narrow your focus. You think only of the next task, the next movement, the next breath. This mental discipline becomes a survival skill, one you will carry long after childhood ends. Yet work also offers something rare in a life shaped by scarcity, a sense of control. While you cannot control weather, illness, or fortune, you can control effort. You can show up. You can complete what is in front of you. This control provides quiet stability, a feeling that your actions matter, even when circumstances are harsh. By the time you approach adulthood, work has shaped not only your body but your sense of self. You measure worth through usefulness. You find comfort in routine. You trust effort more than hope. These traits do not make life easy, but they make it navigable. You've learned deeply and permanently that in a world where little is given freely, work is the closest thing to security you will ever know. It does not promise comfort. It does not guarantee reward, but it offers continuity. And in a life born in poverty, continuity is often the most precious thing of all. As you move further into the world beyond your home, you begin to sense boundaries that are not marked by fences or walls, but that are just as real. These boundaries are made of looks, of silences, of small gestures that tell you where you belong and where you do not. Poverty reveals itself not only through lack, but through distance, a distance quietly maintained by society. You notice it first in the way people look at you. Some glances are brief, dismissive, already moving on. Others linger just long enough to assess, to place you. Clothing, posture, speech, these become signals. You learn that your worn garments speak before you do, that patched fabric and tired shoes tell a story you did not choose to tell. You become aware that you are being read constantly. You learn to read others in return. You notice who carries confidence easily, who moves through shared spaces without hesitation. You see how some voices are heard immediately while others are overlooked. This awareness sharpens your observation. You learn when to step back, when to stay quiet, when to avoid drawing attention to yourself. These choices are not taught. They are learned through experience. Shame enters your life quietly. It is not imposed all at once. It grows slowly, shaped by comparison. You notice what you lack only when you see others who do not lack it. Cleaner clothes, fuller meals, more time for rest. These differences settle into your awareness gently but persistently, creating a sense of being out of place even in familiar settings. You begin to manage your appearance carefully. You smooth clothing as best you can. You hide damage when possible. You become skilled at making do, at presenting yourself in a way that avoids questions. This effort is not vanity. It is protection. Attention can turn into judgment quickly, and judgment carries consequences in a world where opportunity is scarce. You learn that poverty is often mistaken for character. Laziness, ignorance, lack of discipline. These labels hover close, ready to attach themselves. You sense this even when no one speaks it aloud. It shapes how you move through public spaces, how you respond to authority, how you carry yourself among those who have more. You become cautious, careful not to confirm expectations that were never fair to begin with. At the same time, you learn that these invisible walls are not absolute. They shift depending on circumstance. Work can grant temporary passage. Competence can earn brief respect. Reliability can soften judgment. You understand that proving yourself requires constant effort, and that any recognition is fragile, easily withdrawn. This awareness keeps you alert, disciplined, restrained. You notice how poverty isolates as much as it binds. Within your own community, shared hardship creates understanding. Outside it, misunderstanding grows easily. You may feel more comfortable among those who struggle as you do, because explanations are unnecessary. Shared experience replaces words. This creates a sense of belonging, but it also narrows your world. You become aware of how authority treats you differently. Instructions are given more sharply. Patience is shorter. Trust must be earned repeatedly. You do not question this openly, because questioning authority carries risk. Instead, you adapt. You comply. You learn to navigate power carefully, choosing when to speak and when silence serves you better. Despite this, dignity remains important to you. You may lack resources, but you do not lack pride. This pride is quiet, internal, built from endurance rather than recognition. You value honesty, effort, and reliability. These qualities become anchors, ways of asserting worth in a world that often measures value unfairly. You also learn to protect yourself emotionally. Hope is guarded, expectations are lowered, disappointment is anticipated rather than denied. This emotional restraint is not coldness, it is strategy. By expecting less, you reduce the impact of loss. By moving carefully, you preserve what stability you have. As these lessons accumulate, you begin to understand that poverty is not only about what you do not have, it is about how you are seen, how you are treated, and how you learn to see yourself through those interactions. These invisible walls shape your path quietly, guiding your steps even when you are not fully aware of them. By the end of this stage, you carry an unspoken map of social space within you. You know where you are welcome, where you are tolerated, and where you should not linger. This knowledge is heavy, but it is also useful. It helps you survive in a world that does not openly acknowledge these divisions, yet enforces them daily. As you continue to grow, these invisible social walls become easier to recognize, even if they are never named. You begin to feel them before you see them. They are present in the way conversations pause when you approach, in the way invitations are phrased vaguely or not extended at all, in the way certain spaces feel subtly closed to you long before you're told to leave. Poverty teaches you to sense exclusion as a physical sensation, a tightening in the chest, a quiet signal that tells you to step back. You learn that shame is not always loud. Often it is gentle, almost polite. It appears in the form of lowered expectations, of praise that sounds like surprise, of encouragement that feels condescending rather than supportive. You're told you've done well, but the tone suggests that little was expected of you to begin with. You absorb this message slowly, and it settles deeper than open criticism ever could. Over time, you begin to monitor yourself constantly. Your speech becomes measured. You choose words carefully, avoiding anything that might reveal too much. You learn which topics are safe and which ones expose vulnerability. You understand that revealing need can invite judgment, pity, or control. Silence becomes a form of armor, and you wear it instinctively. You also become aware of how poverty shapes opportunity. Doors open more slowly for you, if they open at all. Chances are conditional, temporary, fragile. You may be allowed in briefly, but never fully welcomed. You sense that one mistake could erase goodwill entirely. This awareness makes you cautious, diligent, sometimes overly careful. You learn to minimize risk, even when risk might offer reward. Comparison becomes unavoidable. You notice how easily others move through the world, how lightly they carry themselves. Their confidence feels unearned to you, not because they are undeserving, but because you know how heavy life can be when nothing is guaranteed. This contrast does not always breed resentment. Often, it breeds distance. You feel as though you are observing a different reality, one that runs parallel to yours without intersecting. At times, this distance turns inward. You begin to question your own worth, not openly, but quietly. You wonder if you're missing something essential, something others were given without effort. These thoughts arrive uninvited, especially during moments of failure or rejection. Poverty teaches self-doubt subtly, weaving it into reflection until it feels natural. Yet alongside this doubt, resistance grows. Not loud resistance, not rebellion, but quiet refusal. You refuse to believe that effort means nothing. You refuse to abandon your sense of dignity. You hold on to the belief that your endurance, your reliability, your ability to survive with little have value, even if society does not reward them openly. This belief becomes a private refuge. You notice how those who share your condition develop their own codes of respect. Among them, Worth is measured differently. It is measured by honesty, by willingness to help, by the ability to endure without complaint. Within these circles you feel seen without explanation. This shared understanding offers relief, even as it reinforces separation from the wider world. Authority continues to loom large in your life. You learn that power is rarely neutral. Rules are enforced more strictly on some than on others. Mistakes are judged more harshly. You adapt by becoming careful, compliant, observant. You do not trust systems blindly. You trust individuals selectively, based on experience rather than promise. As you grow older, these invisible walls shape your ambitions. You learn to limit them before the world limits them for you. This self-restraint feels protective. It reduces disappointment, but it also narrows possibility. Dreams become practical, modest, shaped by what feels achievable rather than what feels desirable. You adjust your hopes to fit the space you are allowed to occupy. Despite everything, you do not disappear. You remain present, observant, quietly strong. You learn to navigate spaces where you're not fully welcomed, to extract what you need without demanding what will not be given. This skill is born of necessity, refined through repetition. It is not celebrated, but it is powerful. By the time you leave this stage behind, you carry an acute awareness of social boundaries within you. You know how to move through them, around them, sometimes beneath them. You understand that poverty is not just an economic condition, but a social position constantly reinforced through interaction. This knowledge is heavy, but it sharpens you. You step forward carrying both caution and resilience. Shame may have touched you, but it has not erased you. Invisible walls may surround you, but you have learned how to survive within them, how to preserve dignity, how to maintain a sense of self even when recognition is scarce. These lessons will follow you into every future space you enter, quietly guiding your movements, your expectations, your understanding of the world. And though they were learned through limitation, they have given you clarity about power, about value, and about the quiet strength required to exist in a world that does not always make room for you. As life continues to press against you, you begin to notice something that does not belong entirely to the material world. It does not feed you, clothe you, or warm you directly, yet it shapes how people endure. This presence is belief, not always religion in its formal sense, but a deeper habit of hope, ritual and meaning that helps people carry what would otherwise be unbearable. Faith enters your life not through instruction, but through repetition, through gestures performed at the same moments each day, through words murmured quietly, often when work is finished and bodies are tired. You observe adults pausing briefly, bowing heads, tracing symbols in the air, whispering phrases learned long ago. These acts are small, but they are deliberate. They create moments of stillness in lives otherwise ruled by necessity. You do not yet understand what these rituals mean, but you feel their effect. They slow time, they soften tension, they offer structure beyond labor and survival. In a world where so much feels uncertain, these repeated actions suggest that something remains stable. Something endures even when circumstances change. Religion, when it is present, is rarely grand. It is practical, adapted to limited resources. Gatherings are modest. Places of worship may be cold, crowded, and worn much like homes. Yet within them, people behave differently. Voices lower. Movements become careful. For a brief time, hierarchy shifts. Rich and poor stand side by side, united by words and gestures that suggest a larger order beyond daily struggle. You learn that belief offers explanations where knowledge ends. Illness, loss, misfortune. These are framed not only as accidents, but as part of a larger pattern. This framing does not remove pain, but it gives pain a place. It allows people to accept what they cannot change without losing themselves entirely to despair. Hope, in this world, is not loud. It does not announce itself with certainty. It lives quietly in phrases like, maybe next season, perhaps tomorrow, if we're fortunate. These expressions are cautious, restrained, shaped by experience. People have learned not to expect too much, yet they refuse to expect nothing at all. You absorb this careful hope deeply. You learn to believe without demanding proof, to trust without certainty, to continue without guarantees. This attitude becomes a form of resistance, subtle but powerful. It pushes back against the constant pressure to give up, to surrender to exhaustion, to accept suffering as meaningless. Belief also shapes community. Shared rituals bring people together, even briefly. They create moments where hardship is acknowledged collectively, where grief is recognized, where gratitude is expressed. These moments do not solve material problems, but they strengthen bonds, reminding everyone that they are not enduring alone. You notice how faith offers comfort, especially to those who have little else. When resources are scarce, meaning becomes precious. Stories of endurance, redemption, justice beyond this life. These narratives provide balance to a world that often feels unfair. They offer the promise that effort matters, that suffering is seen, even if not rewarded immediately. As a child, you may question these beliefs silently. You may wonder why hardship continues if faith is strong. These questions are rarely voiced openly. Doubt exists, but it is managed carefully, because belief is not just personal, it is communal. It supports others as much as it supports you. To challenge it openly would risk weakening a structure that many rely on. Over time, belief becomes woven into your sense of self. It does not remove fear, but it gives fear a frame. It does not erase hardship, but it offers language to describe it. You learn prayers, sayings, stories, not as abstract concepts, but as tools. Tools for endurance, for patience, for maintaining dignity when circumstances strip away comfort. Quiet resistance grows from this foundation. Resistance not against authority directly, but against despair, against the idea that life is only suffering, against the erosion of meaning. You resist by continuing, by believing that tomorrow, however uncertain, is still worth meeting. By the end of this stage, faith and hope have settled into you as habits rather than convictions. They guide your reactions, your expectations, your ability to keep going. You may not fully understand them, but you rely on them nonetheless. In a life shaped by poverty, this quiet inner structure becomes as essential as food or shelter, an invisible support holding you upright when everything else feels fragile. As you grow older, belief becomes less about words and more about posture. It shapes how people stand in the face of difficulty, how they endure what cannot be changed. You begin to notice that faith is not always expressed through certainty. Often it exists alongside doubt, fear, and exhaustion. It does not erase these feelings. It allows people to live with them. You see how belief provides rhythm to life beyond work. Certain days are marked as different, set apart from the relentless repetition of labor. These moments may be brief, but they matter. They remind people that life is not only a sequence of tasks, that time can hold meaning beyond productivity. You learn to recognize these pauses as necessary, even sacred. Prayer, when it happens, is rarely dramatic. It is quiet, sometimes almost mechanical, repeated so often that the words lose sharp meaning and gain something else instead: familiarity, comfort, continuity. You notice how people turn to these words when they are tired, when choices have narrowed, when control has slipped away. Prayer becomes a way of releasing what cannot be fixed. You also observe how belief helps people endure injustice. When life feels unfair, when effort does not bring reward, when suffering seems arbitrary, faith offers explanations that soften the blow. These explanations may not satisfy every question, but they prevent despair from taking root completely. They allow people to accept limits without collapsing under them. Hope, shaped by belief, remains cautious. You rarely hear bold declarations about the future. Instead, hope appears in small, restrained forms, a belief that the coming season might be kinder, that illness may pass, that work will continue. This modest hope does not invite disappointment as easily as grand expectations. It protects the heart while still allowing it to open slightly. You begin to internalize this balance. You learn to hope without demanding, to believe without insisting on proof. This approach becomes a survival skill. It allows you to continue investing effort even when outcomes are uncertain. It prevents bitterness from hardening you completely. Faith also influences how people treat one another. Shared belief creates obligation. It encourages acts of kindness, however limited. A shared meal, a moment of help, a word of comfort. These gestures are not abundant, but they are meaningful. They reinforce the idea that even in scarcity, generosity has a place. You notice that belief is not uniform. Some cling to it tightly, others carry it more loosely, some question quietly, some accept without reflection. These differences exist, but they are rarely discussed openly. Faith is personal, yet communal. It belongs to everyone and no one at the same time. Doubt, when it appears, is managed privately. You may question why suffering continues, why some endure more than others. These thoughts arise especially during moments of loss, but you learn to hold them carefully because belief is a shared structure. Undermining it publicly could weaken the fragile support it offers to many. Over time, belief becomes less about answers and more about endurance. It teaches patience, acceptance, the ability to wait. It encourages people to continue doing what must be done, even when motivation fades. In this way, faith aligns closely with work, reinforcing the rhythm of persistence that defines life in poverty. You also begin to understand belief as inheritance. Just as poverty is passed down through conditions, faith is passed down through habit. You inherit gestures, phrases, rituals, not because you fully understand them, but because they have been used before you and because they have helped others survive. This continuity gives belief weight, even when certainty is thin. Quiet resistance grows stronger within you, resistance against despair, against meaninglessness, against the idea that life is only hardship without purpose. This resistance does not shout. It does not demand change. It simply refuses to collapse. It keeps you standing, moving, breathing, even when circumstances offer little encouragement. By the time this phase of life settles, faith and hope have become part of your internal landscape. They do not dominate your thoughts, but they support them. They provide structure where material conditions cannot. They offer a way to endure without losing yourself entirely. In a life shaped by poverty, this quiet resistance is essential. It allows you to carry forward without certainty, to invest effort without guarantees, to believe that existence itself holds value even when comfort does not. And though belief may not change your circumstances, it changes how you live within them, giving you strength that cannot be measured but can be felt day after day as you continue on. Illness enters your life without ceremony, just like everything else. It does not arrive as an exception. It is part of the landscape, as familiar as hunger, cold, and fatigue. From an early age, you learn that the body is not reliable, that it can falter suddenly, sometimes without clear reason, and that recovery is never guaranteed. You notice sickness first in small signs. A cough that lingers too long, a fever that does not break, a weakness that makes ordinary tasks feel heavy. These changes are observed closely because everyone knows what they might mean. In a world with limited remedies, early signs matter. They are watched, discussed quietly, weighed against experience. When illness appears, the household adjusts immediately. Work slows or shifts to others if possible. Tasks are redistributed. Care is improvised. There are no specialists to call, no medicines to rely on with certainty. Knowledge comes from memory, from what has worked before, from remedies passed down through generations. Herbs, warmth, rest, when rest can be spared. You learn quickly that illness is not only physical, it creates tension, fear, calculation. A sick body cannot work. A sick body consumes resources without contributing. This reality is never stated harshly, but it is understood. Care is given, but it exists alongside worry. Can the household afford this pause? Will strength return before resources run thin? As a child, you're taught to be quiet when someone is ill. Movement softens, voices lower. The house takes on a different rhythm. Time stretches. Everyone listens for changes in breathing, for signs of improvement or decline. Sleep becomes lighter. Attention sharpens. You learn that vigilance is part of care. When you are sick yourself, you feel this attention focused on you. Hands touch your forehead. Cloth is placed carefully. Water is offered in small amounts. You sense the concern around you, even if it is not expressed openly. This concern carries weight. You learn that your body matters, but also that its failure would have consequences beyond yourself. Pain is assessed practically. Not all pain is equal. Some can be ignored, some cannot. You learn to describe discomfort clearly, without exaggeration, because accuracy matters. Too much complaint wastes attention. Too little risks neglect. This balance becomes instinctive, shaping how you relate to your own body. You also learn that recovery is uncertain. Some people improve slowly, returning to work weakened but alive. Others do not. Loss is always possible. Death, when it comes, is absorbed into routine more quickly than you might expect. There is grief, but it is contained. Work resumes. Life continues. This does not mean loss is felt less deeply. It means survival demands forward motion. You witness illness taking elders and children alike. You see how fragile life can be at both ends. These experiences shape your understanding of time. You do not assume long life. You assume continuation until continuation is no longer possible. This assumption makes you cautious, attentive, present. Fear accompanies illness, but it is rarely dramatic. It is quiet, persistent. It lives in watchfulness, in careful rationing, in restrained hope. People do not expect miracles. They hope for improvement. This modest hope protects them from despair while acknowledging reality. You begin to understand that health is a form of wealth. Strength is currency. Energy is a resource. You learn to protect your body not through comfort, but through caution. avoiding unnecessary risk, conserving energy when possible, listening to signs of exhaustion before collapse occurs. Illness teaches you empathy early. You see suffering close up without distance. You see how pain alters behavior, how weakness demands patience. These observations shape how you treat others. You learn gentleness not as softness but as attentiveness. By the end of this stage, illness has become part of your understanding of survival. It is not something you expect to avoid entirely. It is something you prepare for mentally and practically. You learn that endurance includes vulnerability, that strength includes knowing when the body cannot continue. In a life shaped by poverty, illness is a constant companion, never fully absent, never fully predictable. And yet, you learn to live alongside it, adjusting, adapting, surviving one day at a time, carrying forward with the knowledge that every healthy day is not guaranteed, but earned and therefore precious. As time passes, illness stops being something you react to and becomes something you anticipate. You learn its patterns, its seasons, its warning signs. Certain months bring coughs that linger. Certain weather weakens joints and chests. Certain kinds of work leave bodies vulnerable. This knowledge does not come from books or instruction. It comes from observation, repetition, and memory. You notice how people prepare themselves quietly. Extra cloth is kept nearby. Fires are tended more carefully. Food, when available, is saved for those who may soon need strength the most. These preparations are never discussed openly, but they happen nonetheless, woven into daily routine as a form of quiet readiness. When illness deepens, the household enters a state of suspension. Normal rhythms bend. Work is slowed or redistributed. Attention narrows. Time seems to move differently, measured not by tasks but by breaths, by changes in temperature, by moments of consciousness or rest. You learn that waiting is sometimes the only possible action. You also learn how limited care truly is. Remedies soothe but do not cure. Warmth comforts but does not heal completely. Rest helps, but only if time allows it. Recovery often feels like negotiation rather than progress. One step forward, one step back. Improvement is celebrated cautiously, because relapse is common and hope has learned to be careful. You begin to understand that sickness does not affect everyone equally. Those already weakened by hunger or exhaustion suffer more. Children struggle because their bodies are still forming. Elders struggle because their strength is already fading. These differences are visible, undeniable. They teach you that survival is uneven, shaped by conditions long before illness arrives. You witness moments of helplessness, times when care has reached its limit, when nothing more can be done. In these moments, belief and ritual often return, offering structure when action fails. Words are spoken softly. Gestures are repeated. The household gathers not to fix, but to endure together. You feel the weight of these moments deeply, even if you do not fully understand them. Death, when it comes, is never entirely unexpected, yet always heavy. It arrives quietly, often at night, often after long watching. When it happens, the house feels different immediately. Sound changes, movement slows. There is a brief pause in routine, a collective intake of breath. Then, gradually, life resumes. Not because grief is absent, but because survival demands continuity. You learn that mourning is shaped by necessity. Tears may be shed privately, memories are shared softly. But work continues. Bodies must still be fed. Shelter must still be maintained. This coexistence of grief and labour becomes normal to you. You learn that sorrow does not stop life. It moves alongside it. Illness also teaches you humility. You see how strength can vanish quickly, how skill and effort cannot always protect the body. This understanding tempers pride. You do not assume control over your own health. You respect the limits of flesh and bone. You learn to listen when your body signals weakness, because ignoring it can have serious consequences. As you grow older, you take on more responsibility in caring for others, fetching water, preparing warmth, sitting quietly with someone who is ill. These acts are not dramatic, but they matter. You learn that care is often about presence rather than cure, about consistency rather than success. You also learn to live with fear without letting it dominate you. Fear of illness never fully disappears, but it becomes familiar. You learn to carry it without panic. This emotional regulation is another form of endurance, one that allows you to continue functioning even when uncertainty looms. By the end of this stage, illness has taught you some of life's hardest lessons, that the body is fragile, that care has limits, that loss is possible at any time, yet it has also taught you compassion, patience, and realism. You understand that survival is not guaranteed, but effort still matters. You carry forward with a deep respect for health, however temporary. You do not waste strength. You do not take comfort for granted. You know that every day without pain is a gift, even if it feels ordinary. In a life shaped by poverty, this awareness becomes a quiet form of wisdom, guiding you gently, steadily, through whatever comes next. Joy does not disappear from your life simply because poverty surrounds it. It changes shape. It becomes quieter, rarer, and more fleeting, but also more intense when it appears. You learn early that joy is not something you possess. It is something that visits, stays briefly, and leaves again, often without warning. You begin to notice joy in moments rather than objects, a shared laugh that escapes unexpectedly, a story told in the evening repeated so many times that everyone knows the ending yet listens anyway, a warm fire on a cold night, drawing bodies closer together, softening voices, easing tension for a short while. These moments are small, but they feel expansive, as if the world briefly opens. You learn that joy often arrives after effort, after work is finished, after hunger has been eased, even slightly, after fear has loosened its grip for a moment. It does not interrupt hardship. It grows in its quiet spaces. This makes joy feel earned, connected to endurance rather than luck. Laughter, when it comes, is sometimes sudden and surprising. It breaks through fatigue, through frustration, through the weight of repetition. It feels almost rebellious, a reminder that hardship has not erased humanity. You notice how laughter changes the atmosphere instantly. Faces soften, movements relax. For a moment, everyone breathes more easily. You also notice how joy is shared instinctively. No one hoards it. When something amusing happens, it is passed along through glances, gestures, whispered remarks. Joy becomes communal, because experiencing it alone would feel incomplete. In a life shaped by scarcity, shared emotion feels richer than private pleasure. Celebrations, when they occur, are modest but meaningful. A seasonal event, a religious day, a successful harvest. These occasions are marked not by excess but by difference. Slightly better food, a pause in routine, a sense that today is not like yesterday. You learn to recognize these moments and hold on to them, because they do not last. You also learn that joy can be physical. Warmth after cold, rest after exhaustion, the relief of sitting down after standing too long. These sensations bring pleasure not because they are extraordinary, but because they contrast so sharply with discomfort. You become attuned to these shifts, savouring them deeply. Children, when they play, create joy out of almost nothing. A game invented on the spot, a race, a challenge. You watch how imagination fills gaps left by material lack. You participate, forgetting hunger and fatigue briefly. These moments remind you that joy does not always require resources, it requires presence. Music, if it exists in your world, is simple and powerful, a song remembered, a rhythm tapped out, a voice raised softly. These sounds carry emotion easily, binding people together. You feel how music lifts spirits, how it travels through small spaces, how it lingers after it ends. You also learn that joy often coexists with sadness. A moment of happiness may be followed quickly by worry. Laughter may fade into silence. This does not make joy weaker. It makes it precious. You learn not to demand permanence. You accept transience as part of the experience. As you grow older, you become more attentive to these moments. You anticipate them quietly. You recognize them when they arrive. You learn to stretch them gently without trying to hold them too tightly. This skill becomes a form of emotional intelligence, allowing you to extract meaning from brief relief. Joy also reinforces bonds. Shared moments create memory. Memory creates connection. These connections help people endure future hardship. You learn that joy is not frivolous. It is functional. It replenishes emotional reserves. It reminds people why they continue. By the end of this stage, you understand that joy, though rare, is essential. It does not erase poverty, but it softens its edges. It offers warmth that no fire can fully provide. In a life shaped by struggle, these moments of human connection become anchors, holding you steady when conditions grow harsh again. As you continue to live within this narrow world, you begin to understand that joy is not the opposite of hardship. It exists beside it, intertwined with it, shaped by it. Joy does not arrive to erase struggle. It arrives to remind you that struggle has not erased you. This distinction becomes clearer as you grow older and more attentive to the emotional rhythms around you. You notice that joy often appears when expectations are lowest, when no one is looking for it, when the day has already taken everything it intends to take. A small success, a task completed earlier than expected, a shared observation that turns into quiet laughter. These moments feel almost accidental, as if joy slipped in unnoticed while everyone was busy enduring. You learn to recognize the physical signs of these moments: shoulders dropping, breathing slowing, voices warming. The atmosphere in the room shifts subtly, as if pressure has been released just enough to allow comfort to seep in. You feel it in your own body, a loosening you did not realize you were holding back. Storytelling becomes an important vessel for joy. Stories do not require resources. They require memory and voice. You hear the same stories many times, but repetition does not dull them. Instead, it deepens them. Each retelling strengthens familiarity, reinforces connection, allows laughter to arrive at known moments. Stories create continuity, linking present hardship to past endurance. You also learn that humour in poverty is often understated, dry, sometimes dark. It does not deny reality. It acknowledges it openly, then bends it slightly, just enough to make it bearable. You learn to laugh at small absurdities, at shared misfortune, at the predictability of struggle. This laughter is not cruel. It is a way of reclaiming control, however briefly. Joy is also found in togetherness itself. Simply being among others who understand your condition without explanation brings relief. You do not need to justify yourself. You do not need to pretend. This mutual recognition creates comfort deeper than words. It allows you to relax parts of yourself that remain guarded elsewhere. Physical closeness contributes to this warmth. Sitting near others, sharing heat, leaning against familiar bodies. In a life where space is scarce, closeness becomes normal, even comforting. Touch is practical, not sentimental, but it carries reassurance. It reminds you that you are not alone, even when circumstances feel isolating. You learn that joy can also be quiet. It does not always announce itself with sound. Sometimes it arrives as contentment, a moment when nothing hurts too much, when hunger is distant, when fear is quiet. These moments are subtle, easy to overlook, yet deeply nourishing. You learn to notice them, to register them consciously, because they pass quickly. As you grow, you become more protective of these moments. You learn not to expose them unnecessarily. You enjoy them privately or within trusted circles. Joy becomes something intimate, fragile, not to be displayed where it might be dismissed or judged. This selectiveness preserves its power. You also learn that joy often carries guilt. Guilt for feeling light when others are heavy. Guilt for laughing when hardship remains. This guilt is rarely spoken, but it is felt. Over time, you learn to accept it as part of the experience. You understand that joy does not betray suffering. It coexists with it. Memory plays an important role here. Joyful moments are remembered vividly, sometimes more clearly than long periods of struggle. You carry them forward, returning to them mentally during harder times. They become proof that relief is possible, even if rare. This memory becomes a resource, one that costs nothing but offers strength. As adulthood approaches, you realize that joy has shaped you as much as hardship has. It has taught you gratitude. It has sharpened your attention. It has shown you what matters when excess is absent. You do not chase happiness as a permanent state. You recognize joy as a series of moments, each valuable in its own right. In this life, joy does not promise escape. It offers grounding. It anchors you to your humanity. It reminds you why endurance matters. Without these moments, survival would be empty. With them, even hardship gains context. By the end of this stage, you understand that joy is not optional. It is essential. It does not arrive often, but when it does, it restores something inside you that hardship steadily erodes. It gives you warmth that no shelter can fully provide. And in a life shaped by poverty, this warmth, shared, fleeting, deeply human, becomes one of the most powerful forces you will ever know. Adulthood does not arrive suddenly in your life. There is no clear moment when childhood ends and something else begins. Instead, adulthood grows quietly around you, shaped by responsibility, expectation, and the slow accumulation of years spent adapting to hardship. One day, you realize that the world no longer treats you as someone who is becoming, it treats you as someone who already must endure. Your body carries the marks of this transition. Strength has replaced softness. Movements are efficient, measured, shaped by years of repetition. You know what your body can do, and more importantly, what it cannot. You do not test its limits carelessly. Injury would cost too much. You have learned to respect fatigue, to manage pain, to preserve energy. These habits feel natural now, part of how you exist in the world. Expectations shift without discussion. You are no longer guided. You are relied upon. Decisions are yours to make, even when choices are limited. You're expected to contribute consistently, to anticipate needs, to carry responsibility without complaint. This weight feels familiar because you have been carrying versions of it for years. What changes is that it no longer feels temporary. You begin to see your own future more clearly, though not expansively. Dreams, if they exist, are practical. Stability, continuity, enough food, predictable days. You do not imagine transformation. You imagine endurance. This is not resignation. It is realism shaped by experience. You understand the cost of hope that reaches too far beyond what circumstances allow. Relationships change as well. You're no longer shielded from adult concerns. You're included in discussions about work, resources, risk. Your opinions may be considered, especially if they're grounded in experience. Respect is earned not through age alone, but through reliability. You learn that adulthood here is defined less by years lived and more by usefulness demonstrated. You also begin to notice how poverty shapes adulthood differently than it shapes childhood. As a child, lack was something imposed on you. As an adult, it becomes something you must manage. You carry responsibility not only for yourself, but for others. This responsibility sharpens your awareness of consequences. Every decision feels heavier because more depends on it. You learn to navigate compromise. You accept work that is difficult, repetitive, sometimes dangerous, because alternatives are scarce. You learn to negotiate small improvements rather than expect change. This constant adjustment becomes second nature. You stop resisting conditions and start working within them, finding small ways to make life more bearable. Emotionally, you grow quieter, not empty, but contained. You have learned that expressing too much can invite vulnerability you cannot afford. You choose carefully where to place trust, where to reveal fear, where to show hope. This restraint is not coldness. It is protection, refined over time. You also become more aware of aging. You see how bodies wear down. You see how years of labor accumulate in posture, in joints, in breath. This awareness tempers ambition. You think not only of tomorrow, but of endurance over decades. You learn to pace your life as you pace your work. Despite this, there is pride in survival. Not loud pride, not boastful, but steady. You've endured conditions that might have broken others. You've learned to live with little, to adapt constantly, to continue even when circumstances offered little encouragement. This knowledge gives you quiet confidence, even if the world does not reward it visibly. Adulthood also brings reflection. You look back on your childhood and realize how brief it was, how quickly responsibility arrived. You do not mourn it openly, but you recognize its absence. You understand that you were shaped early by necessity, and that this shaping cannot be undone. It has become part of who you are. By the end of this stage, adulthood feels less like an achievement and more like a continuation. You have not crossed into a new world. You have simply stepped further into the same one, carrying more weight, more responsibility, and more awareness. You stand where you are, grounded by experience, prepared to continue, because continuation is what you have always done. As the years continue, adulthood settles fully into you, not as a new identity, but as a deepening of everything you've already learned. The habits formed in childhood harden into instincts. You no longer think about conserving energy. You simply do it. You no longer question the need to adapt. Adaptation has become automatic, a quiet reflex shaped by long experience. Your days follow patterns that feel inevitable. Work fills most of your waking hours, not because you are forced, but because survival demands it. You know what happens when work stops. You have seen the consequences too many times to imagine alternatives easily. Even when exhaustion presses heavily, you continue, adjusting pace rather than direction. You begin to take on the role once held by others. You advise younger ones. You demonstrate tasks without explaining them in detail, because explanation is less effective than example. You notice yourself repeating gestures you once observed, speaking words you once heard spoken to you. This continuity feels strange at first, then familiar. Poverty reproduces itself not only through conditions, but through patterns. You understand risk more clearly now. You weigh decisions carefully, not because you are indecisive, but because mistakes carry lasting consequences. A single injury can change everything. A lost opportunity may never return. This awareness makes you cautious, sometimes overly so. But caution has kept you alive. It has preserved what little stability exists. Emotionally, you carry both strength and weariness. Strength from having endured so much. Weariness from knowing that endurance will likely continue to be required. You no longer expect relief to arrive suddenly. You look for small improvements instead. A slightly easier season, a modest increase in security. These become victories worth acknowledging. Relationships take on new weight. You understand dependency more fully now, not as weakness, but as reality. You rely on others, and others rely on you. Cooperation becomes essential. You choose alliances carefully, valuing trust and reliability above charm or promise. Betrayal would cost too much. Loyalty becomes a form of protection. You also learn how little recognition matters. Praise has never been abundant in your life, and you no longer seek it. You measure success privately, through continuity, through the absence of crisis, through the quiet ability to keep going. This internal measure protects you from disappointment, but it also isolates you somewhat from a world that values visible achievement. As you age, you become more aware of time's passage. You feel it in your body, in slower recovery, in stiffness that lingers longer than it once did. You adjust again, pacing yourself, choosing tasks carefully, conserving strength where possible. You think not only of today but of years ahead, of how to endure long enough to matter. Memory becomes a companion. You remember hunger, cold, fear, but also warmth, laughter, rare joy. These memories shape your sense of self. You do not romanticize hardship, but you do not deny what it has taught to you. You recognize that poverty has taken much, but it has also forged resilience, clarity, and an unshakable understanding of what is essential. You may wonder sometimes what life would have been like under different circumstances. These thoughts arise quietly, without bitterness. You have learned that imagining alternate lives changes nothing. Instead, you focus on the life in front of you, on what can still be done, on how to preserve dignity within limitation. As adulthood continues, you become a witness to cycles repeating, to children growing quickly, to elders fading. You see yourself as part of a long chain, shaped by conditions you did not create but must navigate nonetheless. This awareness brings humility. You understand that survival is rarely individual, it is collective, cumulative, shared across generations. In the end, adulthood in poverty is not defined by achievement or fulfillment. It is defined by persistence, by the ability to continue despite uncertainty, by the willingness to adapt again and again. You may not feel victorious, but you have endured. And endurance in a world that offers little comfort is a profound accomplishment. You stand where you are, not triumphant, not defeated, but present, carrying what you have learned, prepared to face what comes next. Because in a life born of poverty, the greatest proof of strength is not escape, it is continuation. Now slowly you begin to step back from this life, not abruptly, not sharply, but gently, as if walking away from a landscape you know intimately, one detail at a time. You leave behind the narrow rooms, the worn floors, the shared warmth of crowded nights. You leave the hunger that shaped patience, the work that arrived before dreams, the quiet calculations that governed every day. You leave the invisible walls, the restrained hopes, the endurance learned long before adulthood. You have lived a life that began with nothing promised, a life where survival was never assumed, only attempted day after day. You have felt how poverty shapes the body, the mind, and the heart, not only through lack, but through constant adaptation. You have learned that hardship does not erase humanity, that joy, though rare, still appears, that faith, however quiet, still supports, that dignity can exist even where comfort does not. This world did not offer you ease, it did not offer you safety, but it demanded resilience, and you answered, not once, but continuously. As you return to the present, you may notice how different your own surroundings feel, the warmth, the quiet, the certainty of tomorrow, and perhaps you ask yourself softly, without judgment, would you have survived this life? Would you have endured its rhythm, its limits, its quiet demands? Thank you for traveling with everyday life in history. If this story comforted you, consider subscribing to the channel so you don't miss future nights of calm history. You can leave a small comment telling us where you're listening from tonight, and like the video to support these long, gentle journeys into the past. Now, let your thoughts slow. Let the story fade and rest, carrying with you the quiet strength of those who lived and endured with almost nothing.